Ned's expression grew grim. He attacked me first. I gave him every chance to yield, but he would not. You can call it defense, vengeance, or a preemptive strike. I did what I had to do. Tyrion studied him, his chin tilted. I believe you, he exhaled. Jaime was always reckless, too confident by half. There's a chance, had you spared him, he might have relented. But pride was ever his downfall. His gaze flickered to Ned's leg, as if remembering the earlier fight with Jaime's men. And now we have a crisis, one that may well engulf us all. Ned inclined his head. That's the unfortunate truth. Do you come with a proposal from your father? Tyrion gave a short bark of laughter. My father is not one for sending me as a mouthpiece. He likely hasn't fully forgiven me for being born a dwarf. No, I came on my own out of a sense of self-preservation. And, dare I say it, an odd sense of familial duty. I wish to keep my house from plunging into a ruinous war if it can be avoided. Ned measured the sincerity in the dwarf's face. Tyrion had a sardonic wit and a mask of amusement, but there was also a fierce intelligence behind his eyes. And how would you prevent war? Tyrion leaned against a table, crossing one leg over the other. By persuading my father to accept a negotiated settlement. One that holds you responsible enough to satisfy his pride, but not so far as to demand your head on a spike. Perhaps a steep payment in gold for House Stark, or the hand of one of your daughters in marriage to a suitable Lannister cousin, or some other arrangement that sets a new alliance. My father is many things, but irrational he is not. Give him enough reason to believe peace is more profitable, and he might relent. Ned's jaw tightened at the mention of Sansa or Arya being bartered away to the Lannisters, but he forced himself to remain calm. And you believe Tywin would agree? Tyrion spread his hands. Possibly. It depends on how the negotiations are framed. Right now, you're painted as a murderer who humiliated House Lannister. He wants your punishment. But if I return to him with a carefully crafted story, perhaps that Jaime provoked the fight, that your family is remorseful, that you are willing to pay compensation, maybe he'll see the wisdom of letting you live. After all, war would cost him dearly, even if he prevails. Ned studied Tyrion's face, searching for duplicity. What do you get from this? Tyrion smiled crookedly. Peace. My father off my back for losing that trial by combat in the Vale, for one. And perhaps a stronger position at Casterly Rock, with the knowledge that I saved the family from a ruinous conflict. You might say it's an investment in my future. Ned's thoughts churned. He was no diplomat, but he knew that if there were any chance to avert bloodshed, he must consider it. I won't offer my daughters in marriage. They are too young. Tyrion waved a dismissive hand. Of course. Merely suggestions. Perhaps you can propose something else. I'm not your father's negotiator. I'm merely a well-wisher who sees an opportunity. The question is whether you trust me to represent your cause to Lord Tywin. I can't promise success, but I can promise to try. A heavy silence lingered. The gold cloaks in the doorway shifted uneasily, unsure if they should intervene, but Ned signaled them to remain at ease. He weighed the risk of placing any faith in Tyrion against the certainty of war if House Lannister remained unappeased. I will consider it, Ned said at last. But if you speak to Tywin on my behalf, know that I will not grovel, nor will I see my daughters used as pawns. Tyrion inclined his head. I'd expect no less from the infamous Ned Stark. Honor is in your bones, I suppose. He studied the chamber, noting the simple furnishings. Well, if you find yourself inclined to propose terms, have a raven sent to the Lannister manse in the city. I'll be staying there for a few days before making my way to Harrenhal, or wherever my father's war camp is by then. He gave a mocking half-bow. Until then, Lord Stark. With that, Tyrion turned and strolled out, the gold cloaks parting to let him pass. Ned exhaled, wondering if the dwarf's visit truly offered a glimmer of hope, or if it was only another layer of intrigue laid upon the city's smoldering tensions. In the days that followed, Ned found no easy answers. He wrestled with the notion of sending peace terms to Tywin. However, King Robert might see that as an undermining of his authority. After all, Robert had declared that Tywin should come to the king to negotiate, not the other way around. Meanwhile, Cersei made public showings of mourning for Jaime, draping the Great Hall in Lannister crimson, lighting candles in the sept, ensuring all the lords at court witnessed her grief and outrage. She rarely attended small council meetings, instead working behind the scenes to pressure lords and ladies to support the cause of House Lannister. In conversation with Ser Barristan Selmy, who visited to check on Ned's leg, Ned asked whether there was any chance the king might muster his own forces to meet Tywin in the field. Selmy's face turned grave. "I fear Robert's heart isn't in it, my lord," he confided quietly. "He's grown weary of wars and hunts. He drinks too much. Some days, he rouses himself enough to threaten any who defy him, but other days he seems to crumble beneath the queen's demands. The realm looks to him for leadership, yet I see only a shadow of the man who conquered the Targaryens." Ned sighed. "The burdens of rule have changed him. He was never made to sit the throne." Selmy nodded sadly. "I served the Mad King. I saw how power can twist men. Robert is not twisted, but he is ground down, worn. That leaves room for others to maneuver, which they do at every turn." He lowered his voice. "I wish you luck, Lord Stark. The realm cannot afford another war." In that faint hope, Ned found only the echo of his own fears. Days slipped by, each one bringing new tidings. Rumors of Lannister outriders near the Riverlands, of Tully bannermen preparing defenses at Riverrun, of Varys hinting that the Lords of the Vale might intervene if Catelyn petitioned her sister. Yet nothing definitive happened. It was as though the entire kingdom held its breath, poised on the brink. One afternoon, a summons arrived from the king. Ned was escorted, under guard as ever, to Robert's solar. He found the king alone, sifting through parchments on a large wooden table. The solar smelled of wine and dust. Robert's hair was unkempt, dark circles under his eyes. When Ned entered, Robert waved dismissively at the gold cloaks. "Out. Stand guard outside. I wish to speak to Lord Stark alone." The men bowed and obeyed. Ned approached. "Your Grace," he said. He could see the tension in Robert's broad shoulders, the meaty fists that clenched around a parchment. Robert looked up, face mottled with anger. "Read this." He shoved the parchment forward. Ned took it carefully and glanced over the bold script. A message from Tywin Lannister, thick with veiled threats, demanding that the king hand over Ned or face the wrath of House Lannister in open war. Or, failing that, Tywin demanded gold and hostages from among the greatest houses of the realm as partial atonement. The letter ended with a scrawling signature, Tywin's name, beneath the sigil of the lion. Ned set the parchment down. "He is serious," Robert snorted. "Aye, he is. Serious enough to have half the realm cowering." The council babbles about sending ambassadors, offering more gold, forging a marriage alliance. They act like the Lannisters aren't already the richest house in Westeros. And now the rumors that Tyrion is in the city, stirring who knows what mischief. Ned thought of Tyrion's visit. "He may be trying to broker some arrangement," he offered quietly. "Arrangement?" Robert spat. "Tywin wants your head for his precious golden boy. Even if Tyrion tries to soothe him, do you think the old lion will just roll over?" He paced the floor, heavy footfalls echoing. "If I could just challenge Tywin to single combat, that would settle things. But the cunning old bastard would never meet me in the field alone. He'll send half the West after us." Ned stood firm. "There must be another way. War will devastate the realm." Robert whirled on him, anger flaring in his eyes. "Another way? Perhaps if you'd let Jaime yield instead of driving your sword through his chest, I wouldn't be in this predicament." "Seven hells, Ned. I've half a mind to." He stopped himself, fists trembling. Then he sagged, as if deflated, and sank into a chair. Ned felt an old guilt twist in his chest. He would not apologize for defending himself, but Robert was not entirely wrong. Jaime's death had pushed them to this breaking point. "I regret that it came to violence," Ned said quietly, "but I do not regret surviving." Robert regarded him with weary, bloodshot eyes. "I know, old friend. I know." He wiped a hand across his face. I've asked myself every night if I should have forced the Lannisters to face justice long ago. For all the rumors, all the schemes. But I was blind, or I didn't care. Now the cost is at my doorstep. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the realm pressing down. Then Ned cleared his throat. What do you intend to do about Tywin's demands? Robert gave a bitter laugh. I'll send a reply refusing to hand you over. I won't do that, not after all we've been through. Instead, I'll propose an alternative. I'll offer that you remain as my hostage in King's Landing, and I'll sweeten it with gold and an apology. Apologies are cheap, after all. That might give Tywin pause. He scowled. But the man's pride is legendary. This might just make him angrier. Ned inclined his head. Then let me write to my son in Winterfell. Perhaps if I tell Robb to stand down and not provoke the Lannisters, that might help. Do it, Robert muttered, half in defeat. Gods, Ned, is there no end to this? I can't even stomach a decent meal anymore. Everything is ash in my mouth. Ned said nothing. He remembered Robert in his youth. Proud, reckless, unstoppable. Now he saw a man weighed down by a crown too heavy for anyone's head. We can only try to avert the worst, Ned offered softly. Robert nodded, and the meeting ended. Ned returned to his chambers, mind churning with uneasy thoughts. Hours later, in the quiet hush of twilight, he set quill to parchment to write to Robb, urging restraint. The words burned as he wrote them, for he knew that if Tywin marched on the Riverlands, House Stark would be honor-bound to come to their Tullykins' defense. But caution might buy time, if nothing else. The next day, the city awoke to news that Tywin's host had moved closer to the border of the Riverlands. The drums of war beat louder in every rumor. The gold cloaks grew more vigilant. King Robert snapped at his council with mounting impatience. Cersei glided through the corridors like a specter of vengeance, refusing to speak with Ned but ensuring that he felt her scorn in every glance. The tension seemed ready to fracture at any moment. Amid this ever-darkening atmosphere, Tyrion Lannister made his next move. Late one evening, after Ned had dined quietly with Arya and Sansa, a raven arrived bearing a small sealed letter from Tyrion, requesting a covert meeting. Its tone was terse but polite. I have pertinent matters to discuss. Come to Chataya's brothel in the Street of Silk after midnight. Bring only one guard if you must. Discretion is paramount. Ned's stomach tightened with mistrust. A brothel of all places. It reeked of Littlefinger's style of subterfuge. Yet if Tyrion had information or a plan to halt Tywin's march, could Ned afford to ignore it? The risk was immense. Cersei would pounce on any sign that Ned was sneaking about under cover of darkness. But ignoring a Lannister overture might close the only door left to peace. He debated it for hours. Ultimately, as the city's bells tolled the hour of the bat, Ned donned a plain cloak with a deep hood and left the Tower of the Hand, accompanied only by Tomard, a loyal guard who had followed him from Winterfell. They slipped past the gold cloaks with the explanation that Ned was going to meet with the king in the royal apartments. Whether the guards believed it or not, they asked no questions. He was still Lord Stark, after all, albeit a diminished one. Threading through torchlit streets, Ned and Tomard made their way to the Street of Silk, that district of revelry and pleasure. Drunken men lurched in and out of glowing establishments, and courtesans beckoned from doorways. The night was warm, the air pungent with sweat, cheap wine, and perfume. Ned felt a flush of distaste. He missed the crisp air of the north where one could see the stars overhead without the haze of city lights and lustful indulgence. Chataya's brothel was a modestly elegant building draped in silks of exotic colors. A tall, graceful woman of Summer Islander heritage greeted them, her dark eyes discerning. She recognized Ned at once. How many men in King's Landing carried themselves with such a bearing, especially wearing a wolf's face of regret? But she asked no questions, simply gestured for him to follow. Inside, music drifted from a distant chamber, soft and alluring. The hush of parted curtains revealed glimpses of candlelit rooms, plush cushions, half-naked figures moving in shadow. Ned kept his gaze resolutely forward, ignoring the seductive laughter. Chatiah led him to a private upper room. There, behind a beaded curtain, Tyrion waited at a low table, a flagon of wine at hand. A single candle lit the space, casting flickering shadows on the walls. Tyrion stood, or rather, hopped down from the tall chair, when Ned entered. He wore fine clothing but not overly ostentatious, as if he too wished for some discretion. "Lord Stark," he said quietly, "you've come. I wasn't certain you would." Ned motioned for Tomard to wait by the door, out of earshot. Then he approached Tyrion. "I'm not fond of skulking through brothels under cover of darkness," he said, unable to hide his distaste. "But you implied you had important news." Tyrion offered a wry grin, pouring 2 cups of wine. "Drink or not, as you wish. It's Arbor Gold, though I've had better." He sipped his own cup. "To the matter at hand. I've spoken with my father's men. They ride to meet him at Harrenhal, then continue onward toward the Trident. My father intends to provoke the Riverlands into open conflict, forcing the king to choose between defending them or ceding them. One step from a war that will soon be unstoppable." Ned's heart sank. "And you think it can still be stopped?" Tyrion set his cup down. "Perhaps, if you provide a suitable counteroffer, I can deliver it to my father before the lines are fully drawn. He might see reason if there's enough reward or restitution in it for House Lannister. Call it blood money if you must." Ned's jaw tightened. "What do you expect me to offer?" Tyrion leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Gold, certainly. A formal apology from House Stark, perhaps, acknowledging that Jaime's death, while the result of combat, was unfortunate. You might even suggest that your daughter Sansa be betrothed to a Lannister ally, though not necessarily a direct Lannister cousin. Another cadet branch. So it stings less, yet Tywin can trumpet it as a victory." Ned bristled. "You Lannisters are obsessed with marriage alliances. My daughter's happiness is not a coin to be spent buying peace." Tyrion shrugged. "I understand. But in the Game of Thrones, marriage is a tool. Think carefully, Lord Stark. Would you rather see your daughter wed to some third cousin of House Lannister, or see war claim tens of thousands of lives, possibly including your own sons and your own men?" Ned felt a surge of protectiveness warring with practicality. "I will not decide so rashly." "Then we're at an impasse," Tyrion said, his tone light but his gaze serious. "We need to move quickly. My father's patience is short, and once he crosses the Trident with steel unsheathed, his demands will only grow." Ned exhaled, pacing the small space. The candlelight threw his tall shadow onto the walls. "I cannot offer you an answer tonight. This is not a decision I can make alone, nor lightly." Tyrion pursed his lips. "Time is your enemy, Lord Stark. My father will not hold back his men indefinitely. But a very well. I'm leaving the city in 2 days for Harrenhal. If you have a proposal, send it to me before then." He paused, sipped again. "And a warning. The Queen has her spies everywhere. If she learns you're negotiating behind King Robert's back, she might see that as treason. So be discreet." Ned nodded curtly. "I understand." They exchanged no further pleasantries. Tyrion gestured that the meeting was over, and Ned departed with Tomard in tow, descending the brothel stairs past the curious stares of patrons and courtesans. Outside, the city felt suffocating in the midnight gloom. A hot wind blew from the east, stirring the smell of stale ale and rotting garbage. Ned pulled his cloak close, feeling a pang of longing for the brisk air of Winterfell. He did not speak as they threaded back through the labyrinth of streets, slipping through side passages to avoid unwanted attention. The gold cloaks at the Tower of the Hand let him pass with only a perfunctory nod. Upstairs, in the silent corridor, Ned paused before his chamber door. Light shone from beneath it, indicating someone waited within. When he entered, he found Peter Baelish leaning casually against a table, examining a half-burned candle. The man had a penchant for appearing unexpectedly, and Ned stiffened, cursing himself for failing to predict that Littlefinger might be watching. Baelish set the candle down. "My, but you keep late hours, Lord Stark," Littlefinger said in a voice of mock concern. "The king's prisoner, Out for a midnight stroll? The gossip will run wild. Ned shut the door firmly behind Tomard. Lord Baelish, he said coldly, what are you doing in my chambers? Baelish slid off the table, taking a step closer. I came to warn you that you're walking a dangerous path, he said softly, his smile thin as a razor. Chataya's, was it? I have eyes there. Spies, you might say. If I found out, how long before the Queen learns as well? Ned's hand clenched at his side. I don't answer to you. No, you don't. But you'd be wise to hear me out. Baelish's gaze flickered to Tomard, then back to Ned. Tyrion's playing his own game. Cersei's playing another. Varys, the king, Tywin, Renly. All of them have their pieces on the board. If you move the wrong piece in haste, you'll find your entire line toppled. Ned's anger rose. He was weary of these insinuations, these sly comments. What do you propose? Baelish gave a shrug. An alliance, perhaps. I may be able to help you craft a proposal that Tywin would find acceptable, while also shielding you from the Queen's wrath. But I won't do it out of charity. I'll want certain considerations in the future. Opportunities, shall we say, for advancement. Ned glowered. You want more power. We all want something, Lord Stark. Baelish paused, reading Ned's expression. Think on it. A war can be very bad for your family, for your precious North, for the realm. Sometimes the lesser evil is a small compromise here or there, like a well-placed marriage, a bribe of gold, or the promise of influence. Ned swallowed bitterness. Everywhere he turned, the currency of politics came back to alliances sealed with children or gold. But the realm's precarious situation could not be ignored. I will think on it, he finally said, but do not trespass in my chambers uninvited again. Baelish offered that insincere smile. I trespass nowhere, my lord. I merely appear where I am needed most. Good night. With that, he slipped out, leaving only the faint scent of lavender oil in his wake. Ned stood silent, tension coiled in every muscle. At length, he dismissed Tomard, undressed, and lowered himself onto the bed, though he did not expect restful sleep. The city was full of watchers, each one a potential snake in the grass. Even the men who offered help had their own hidden knives. Ned's head spun with thoughts of Sansa, Arya, Robb, Catelyn, and the thousands upon thousands of innocents who would suffer if open war erupted. If the price of peace was some humiliating apology and a significant marriage alliance, could he bring himself to pay it? He was a Stark, and Starks held duty and honor above all. Yet the men and women who would die in the next war, would their ghosts reproach him if he refused a compromise that might save them? The candle guttered low, the shadows elongated. Outside, a distant owl hooted. Ned closed his eyes, remembering the final moments of Jaime Lannister's life in that cobbled street, the echoing clash of steel. Perhaps, in some other world, they would not have crossed blades. Perhaps Jaime's arrogance could have been subdued, or Ned's sword arm held back. But that world was gone, replaced by this ominous tension that threatened to engulf the Seven Kingdoms. He drifted into a restless sleep. He dreamt of wolves and lions locked in mortal combat, fur and fang against golden mane. The dream twisted, and he saw the Iron Throne, looming in darkness, with a battered crown at its foot. When he awoke at dawn, chest tight and heart pounding, he realized no solutions had come to him in his slumber. War hovered like a vulture over the realm. The hour of decision approached, and Eddard Stark did not know whether he would choose in time, or whether fate would choose for him.